You're listening to Rise of the Independents, the podcast dedicated to agencies, their clients, campaigns, and partners on the rise. ROTI is presented by MiO Marketplace, a sales enabling tool to help agencies and their teams find, keep, and grow their business. And now here's your host, Sean Halter.
Welcome to Rise of the Independent, the podcast where we talk to and about independent agencies that are on the rise, their clients and their partners, presented by MiO Marketplace. We're excited to have as our guest today, Torres, VP of Advertising over Demandbase, and Brooke Smith, SVP of Strategy and Growth over at The Variable. Thank you guys both so much for joining me on the podcast. Al, you and I often, I would say, maybe not always, but often get a chance to catch up. Advertising week is just a couple of weeks away. I know, Brooke, you just before we started the podcast mentioned that you had just recently moved out of New York and you're living in the beautiful hills of North Carolina to some extent. So I'll ask both of you, are either of you attending Advertising Week this year? And if not, have you been to it in the past? Al, let me start with you.
Yes, I have been to it in the past, and I am attending this year as well. We are having some of our team attend, officially, and then others where there's happy hours and events and other things going on tangentially as they tend to happen with those bigger events. But I'm interested. Obviously, AI just continues to be kind of it's starting to feel a little bit like an overpushed story. But the part I do think is interesting is as you see these publishers continue to decline in regards to their audiences by some of the numbers, 30, 40, 50%, where people see that leading, because I think that's a really interesting story that's been talked about, but I don't think it's getting as much attention as it should.
We'll definitely dig a bit more into AI within the episode. How about you, Brooke? Are you attending this year? Have you been in the past?
I am, and I have. We have a full team that comes up, including our Chief Creative Officer and our CEO, Courtney Lewis. And much like Al, we use it to see relevant content and meet with friends and colleagues and other brands and sort of pulse check what's going on in the industry. But we also use it just as a time to be in New York and, touch and feel new things and meet with people that we love there, like you, Sean.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I feel like it's still kind of our Super Bowl to some extent. There's some great events out there, Possible being one of those that I really feel like and have really enjoyed. Certainly some, areas of specialization, events like Cannes. But I still love Advertising Week, regardless of the venue itself sometimes being a little challenging. Usually I'm operating down in the dungeon at this point on that bottom floor. But, it's still a who's who. You still get a chance to see people of all various shapes, sizes at different points in their career. And for whatever reason, maybe it's just because we've been pretty active there over the last couple of years, I've probably got more invites to tangent events in and around and post this year than maybe in years past. So that will be interesting to kind of just navigate our way through that. We're also going to do something ourselves a little bit differently than we've done the last few years. We've podcasted typically from there, and we started doing some more short form content. We're calling them marketing bites. We do them on a regular basis, and we've done those more consistently at events this year. And I think we're going to probably do more of those this year because it gives us a chance to interact with a lot more people when we do these kinds of podcasts, just like you guys are on. We get to talk to 2 or 3 people, and then we may do 2 more or 3 more throughout the week. But when we do these short form content pieces, we really get a chance to push out a lot of content. And we're also able to often put that out almost live. So we certainly hope we get a chance to catch up with both of you there and hear your thoughts on how the event is going. The next question that I've got is called Hot or Not. Let's talk about some brands that are hot or not right now. Stay away if you can from kind of the typical Cracker Barrels of the world and what's happening with Gap maybe. But talk to us about somebody else, something that maybe we're not seeing, right at the very top, but it's been on your radar. Brooke, how about you? Who do you feel like is hot or not these days?
So what's hot? I tend to not like not because I'm one of those people who never takes anything off the table, depending on the brand and its vibe. But I think kind of what's hot right now is brands and agencies that are kind of leaning into brand and performance as 2 different worlds. The ones that are collapsing that false wall and realizing what really the work has got to be about. I also think that the brands who aren't waiting for permission are kind of hot right now. And I'll give you an example. Those are the ones I think move fast. They're taking bigger cultural risks right now. They're not waiting on 50 decks of data to make calls. They're moving faster. They're more agile. I will fully disclose it's one of our clients and partners, Liquid Death, but they're building community and culture as much as they're selling water right now in the world. And if I were forced to pick a what's not hot, I would say the safe middle. I think brands that are over optimizing performance and forget to inspire in a world that's sort of chaotic and insane and noisy right now are sort of invisible.
Great picks. I like those. Al, how about from your perspective? Who's hot or not in the industry right now?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you one that it came up. I was watching CNBC this morning, and that was more from obviously a financial perspective, but for what is considered an unsexy market, but Palo Alto Securities, which is a customer of ours, and recently their VP of marketing did a talk at an A&A event, and I found it super fascinating that cybersecurity protection, it's always kind of like everyone knows it's important, but it's like insurance, you got to buy it, so like no one really like wants to buy it per se. And the amount of push that they have around really telling a value story, right? It's not about their features, it's not about all the things the product can do. It's like, how does Palo Alto make your business better? And like the whole story arc that this individual kind of talked through in there, it was a keynote, was super impressive. Anyway, you continue to see kind of like how marketing can influence financials when you start seeing them really, obviously there's momentum for other reasons, but that being kind of one of the components. So I'll tell Palo Alto is one of the hot ones.
The next question is called Hey, That's Me, where you get a chance to tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do. Al, I'm going to stick with you on this one because of the topic that you just brought up. There's a lot of events that are out there. People sponsor a lot of events for a lot of reasons. But sometimes if you're not careful, you just end up with logo soup, right? Here's our sponsor list of 28 different sponsors, of whom you don't know if you see their booth anywhere. Were they just there for the wine and cheese? So talk about Demandbase, talk about yourself, talk a little bit about how you guys do try to stand out from the pack when it comes to what you guys do and why you do it.
So here at Demandbase, I run the advertising group, which is a little bit unique because we are solely focused on the B2B side of the world, right? So accounts-based marketing, all B2B, and we are the only player in that marketing platform space that has built out their own DSP specifically focused on B2B. So a lot of acronyms there. So what's really unique is like we're going out there this year specifically, and on top of being at Adobe Summit and other B2B focused Gartner, Forrester, and those kind of events, we're doing a big push into the advertising week and looking at Cannes for next year. And, I think it's a unique use case of where we think that, marketing as a whole, advertising is usually seen as a separate thing. In our world, we're really trying to mirror it. We're like advertising plus marketing and understanding the true go-to-market is a unified thing and has exponential value doing it that way. So we're doubling down on a lot of other events that we would not have done kind of previously. And I think that's super exciting from our end.
It's been nice again to see not only the growth of yourself, but the growth of the company. And it's such I don't want to say unique position, but it is a position that you guys have filled that was certainly necessary out there. Brooke, talk to us a little about what you do, why you do, and why you're out there in North Carolina.
Whoa, it's a big move from Brooklyn 2 months ago. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background. It's a bit of a unicorn background. So you'll note if you look at my LinkedIn, I started as a producer at CBS in New York. So I always have called New York City home, even though I grew up in North Carolina. And there were very few things that could have budged me out of Brooklyn. And the Variable happens to be one of them. It's an agency that is sort of proudly not in the major media markets, but lives like we are. And so we're based in a little community. I told you a little earlier, Sean, that it's a historic innovation quarter. It's old warehouses. It's completely renovated, and now it's full of tech and makers and dreamers and doers. So we get to sort of walk those streets. I think brands that come to us are looking for power. They don't want to just keep pace. They come here to disrupt or redefine legacy brands to be reborn. And the creative is sort of king here, but we are a full service agency. And my background, a lot of it has been in agencies. One of the things I love most about the Variable is the culture. And a lot of the young guns here who are amongst the loudest voices and the most influential. And I got that honest. I started my career, one of my early jobs was working in the IPG family, and we had a team of people called the Young Guns, and they had their finger on the pulse. They touched every retail hang tag, and they saw everything that was moving in the market. So we had them every year educate the rest of our teams, the older folks like me. And, so our clients are everybody from Liquid Death to Napa Auto Parts and so on. And we work across pretty much every industry and vertical. But like Al, I spent the last 8 years in B2B tech. So I've got a weird blend of mix, but the Variable is what brought me back. And in particular, our new female CEO, Courtney Lewis, who is one of the youngest ever appointed CEOs in the ad industry. And I think that's pretty awesome.
You guys probably have some shared synergies somewhere along the way. You just talked a little bit about the young guard, the old guard. We're going to start digging into AI a little bit right now. I felt very old last night. I was in ChatGPT. I was trying to get it to build something for me. I needed to tokenize each of these various sections. It'd say, okay, we're good. Let's move on to the next one. Then it would go backwards. And it was 11:45, and I literally just think I said out loud, I'm getting too old for this shit. Like, what in the hell is going on here? And so I sent one of the guys that does tech, for us. I sent him a note last night to send to him this morning, because at least I do understand how my Apple phone works. And I was just like, can you do this for me? Like, I want to learn how to do it, but there's still a level of frustration along with it. So let's dig into that level of frustration. Al, you talked about it just a little bit, what's happening out in the space. So where's your level of frustration with AI right now? And where do you feel like it's headed for those of us who've maybe been in the industry for a little while and still remember using Excel sheets to remember who our contacts were?
The frustration part is it's changing very quickly, right? So frankly, probably every other week, but every month there's some new tool that you need to learn because it is changing the way that we will operate today. So I think that is one of the things that's cumbersome, right, to keep up with. For those that are a little stickier, where corporations are taking things on, like we have from a business level, we have Gemini license corporate-wise, we have a ChatGPT license, we have enablement and training that we're having the entire organization do to start to get up to speed. But it's the basics, really, right? And so it kind of falls on you as an individual to take that extra time to learn it, unless you're really involved in that world on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's part of the frustration. And us as consumers and users, I think Excel still is used probably predominantly, and whether it's in Google Sheets or Excel, but that framework is exactly the same. And there's a reason they copied it, because that's what people were used to. It's the reason Airtable looks like Excel, because that's what people are used to. So I do think that some of these different tools will have to adapt more to how we are accustomed to things, so that they get better adoption, and then they can change along the way as we change. But I do think to getting to full adoption will take more time than we always expect. My
partner Stephen Moy often reminds me that it's like learning another language. I complain about it, but it is. You're learning another language, and you have to learn it because literally you're moving there to some extent. Brooke, how about from your perspective? Where do you feel like AI is either bringing some value to the agency, or how are you guys navigating those difficult, rough edges that are still out there?
AI for us is about multiplying impact. So we're using it to make the what if stage move faster, help us prototype, visualize, pressure test ideas, that kind of thing. And we do that because we want to spend more of our human energy on the stuff that really matters, right? Finding the truth, shaping the story, making something people actually care about. And I will fully disclose, I would much rather learn to use AI than have to do a pivot table in Excel. That is what frustrates me. But I think it's also for agencies about tightening the loop between strategy and creative and performance. So it gives us a way to be faster as we model scenarios and predict outcomes and feed performance data back into our creative iterations. And that just wasn't possible for us to do before as quickly as we can now. For an agency like The Variable, that's really everything. It helps us compete and be fast and nimble with agencies that have hundreds of employees in bigger markets. And it gives us the ability to do just that. I'll also just tell you, I read the story this morning. I started my day reading the current story. The headline was "Agencies as we know them will be dead." Did you see that debate?
Oh, one that was like in 10 years, like none of this is going to be here anymore kind of thing.
It was at the Digital Marketing Expo and Conference, and it was a lot of Germany's leading advertisers. And it was a very heated debate around AI and the death of the modern agency. And I know we probably all kind of, there's this end and that end, and we may fall somewhere in the middle. But the other thing that we know, or at least is reported to be true, is that over 80% of the content AI is feeding back is coming from earned media. So our PR team is busier than they've ever been. And I think people who used to think that was a nice to have are really starting to understand that communication strategy and that piece of earned is really critical now.
Let's talk about tools themselves. We've just spent a few moments talking about AI and the necessary requirement really at this point to both have it and learn it. Figuring out which one fits for the right things is certainly interesting there. Sitting in your space as an independent agency, Brooke Smith, outside of AI and making sure that you understand Claude and everything else, what are some of the other tools that you guys are using right now, either for new business development, for managing internal teams, external teams, or just navigating your way, through the maze of client engagement at this point?
I'll skip the AI tools because we talked a bunch about those. We use a lot of audience and listening tools to help us ground our work in human insight. Things like Nano Banana for speed and efficiency, Runway for video first creative. We use Firefly, we use Figma, Topaz. Those are just a few. Our tools aren't really just about efficiency. I go back to how we as a smaller independent can compete toe to toe with the larger national shops. That's how we do it, right? You have to have the right tech stack and you have to have the right tools to make the work as good, as fast, as awesome in the market.
There were a lot of people that felt like the event Possible this past year, Miami was super wrapped around tech. And there were some people that felt like, well, it was super tech heavy. But from my perspective, to your point, you need to have the right tech stack. And if you don't know what this one does or what that one does, it's kind of hard to navigate. And there's obviously lots of choices out in the market. Al, how about from your perspective? Again, you guys are talking to, businesses about business to business marketing. Maybe that tool set is the same. Sometimes it's different. How are you navigating to help people to better understand what Demandbase really can do for them as a company, whether that be, from a business to business perspective or beyond?
We've taken an approach of, I wouldn't call it a tagline, but basically better together, right? Which is every organization, because we focus heavily on the enterprise space, is going to do something a little different, is going to have a tech stack that is a little different. And so we want to be able to adapt to that, right? We want to be the platform that you use for ABM. And if you want to use certain niche tools, well, we'll plug those in. If you want to use our tools, if we have an offering for it, you can use ours. And so that adaptability has been kind of a key selling point for us as we continue to kind of focus on the enterprise side of things, because that's just the reality of where they are, right? They're all in different stages and different places. We just signed a Fortune 50 company as a client, and they are in stage 1 of ABM. They're just moving into this motion. And so they need a different level of education as well as setup and structure, as they progress into their motion. So, there are a lot of great tools out there, right, that are more niche, and we take on very much the platform play with a lot of tools ourselves, but again, with the ability to kind of be flexible as needed.
I'll give you a shout out for Demandbase, because everybody that works with me knows I think if ABM is not at the center of everything you're doing, you're dead.
We had an interesting conversation last week about Cindy Rose, who's leading WPP right now with their days at Microsoft. And it was one of the things that I felt like that independent agencies do have a level of flexibility that you sometimes do not get when you are at a big holding group. And do they run the risk sometimes, Cindy notwithstanding, of this is our new tech partner, and so we have to use all of their products for everything we do, even if that product isn't very good. It just seems to get disseminated across every single layer sometimes when you're at that level. And sometimes that is an efficiency for clients. It actually slows a client down. Let's talk about clients a little bit deeper right now. Again, all this talk, a conversation around tech, but it's still a client business to some extent. It's still a very personal business. And so how do you continue to build those personal relationships in a world where it's hard to sometimes meet in person other than at an advertising week or Possible? Brooke, let me start with you there. How are you still getting a chance to kind of sit in front of your clients and spend some time? Prospects?
Yeah, so we are strangely in this new remote world where, we all think tech has got us so connected. We've never been more disconnected, right? You're 100% right. And this will sound insane, but we're an in-office agency and everybody lives in North Carolina. And the week I moved here from New York, 4 other leaders started that week and moved from DC, Chicago, and New York. So our clients tend to like to visit us here because it's not a big metro and they can escape from their hometown and their day-to-day life. So we still do a lot of in-person. The other thing we just did recently and operationally is we sort of broke the model on account service and account management, and we moved our leaders that are really business consultants into a different team and moved all of our day-to-day project managers and account managers into our delivery operations group so that we have a team that is solely focused on connecting to our clients, to the C-suite, to the strategy, to the market as it's trending and moving and forces are shifting, so that we are really focused on how to capitalize on their growth and bring new ideas and new watch outs to them constantly. So we're still a big fan of the in-person and getting on planes and being there to do the work.
Al, how about from your perspective?
So we are kind of opposite in that front. Like, we are fully remote and we are global in nature. So, we are at events to meet customers there. We definitely have a big push to get our account directors to go in person to meet with customers. And depending on the customer, it can be easy because they're in office, and with others, they're equally distributed. So you can meet one of the people on the team, but not everybody. There's also what I've noticed a bit of a generation, obviously caused by COVID, where people have been accustomed to Zoom. And so if you have younger, account directors who are not in that motion and they're in their probably mid-20s, late 20s, when you're like, go meet the client in person, it will be different. It will be a different conversation. It will be a different relationship. They default to just, I could just do this on Zoom and not have to worry about it.
Take off my pajama pants.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating thing because, when I started in my sales career, you'd have your first meeting in person, right? And it was a first impression, and hopefully from that things got, and now totally understand why, just from a cost efficiency perspective, nobody does that, right? It's like, I'll give you 30 minutes to assess whether I'll give you more and vice versa, right? I'm not going to fly out to you and spend hotel night and everything else to do that. But once we pass that point and there's either an opportunity or you are a customer, we are trying to double down and say, like, we want to actually build this relationship. But it's definitely harder than it ever has been.
It's definitely changed from my days of running an agency in Florida, where you were almost always on a plane. Now, the other day, I had to go to Williamsburg for something, and I was like, oh, I gotta go to Williamsburg.
Felt like going to LA.
Gotta cross two bridges. Like, what the hell? All right, guys, we've got time for a couple more questions. This one is called There's an Award for That. And so it's just about that. Award season always seems like it's around us. I get some kind of an invite to an award. It seems like almost every week. And yet outside of Cannes, I'm not sure if independent agencies really have a great award season for them other than the small agency awards. And there's nothing wrong with that. But by the name implies, sometimes it feels like, is that good? Is that bad? What is that? So let's talk about awards themselves. Al, I'm going to ask you first, again, simply because you're in a slightly different space. But what do you feel like either you see out there as you're talking to agencies that you feel like, I wish they had an award for this?
The B2B world is a little more new to me.
Sure.
From what I'm hearing, it's an area of growth for a lot of agencies. So even the few larger independent agencies are say that's an area of focus for us. Some of the larger agencies that we haven't actually kind of talked about it as B2B, but we want to kind of maybe look at that. Those that are truly in the B2B world focused on more than just leads, right? More than just like the very tactical stuff that is quick and easy to quantify. Those that really take the approach, and I'll just go back to Palo Alto, like, there's a real marketing story. Like, you need a real brand. You need to be able to then go and tell that story and then show features and deliver and everything else. And there was an interesting stat that was done by LinkedIn, which said that 82% of people had already heard of the brand they ended up working with before they started their search, which to me just doubles down. Like, if you don't have the awareness factor at the start, trying to get into consideration set later on is near impossible.
I do definitely feel like that business to business, even just advertising in that space, doesn't get the love that it often deserves. How about from your standpoint, Brooke, what's an award you wish you was out there for the independent advertising agencies?
I sort of think the culture award should be real. I think a lot of people talk the talk and have a really hard time showing up to give a shit about their employees and really make work awesome. So we spend a lot of time doing that. The other thing I'll say is awards, while they don't dictate our work and we don't over-analyze them, they do matter. The Variable has won you mentioned the Small Agency Award 5 times. It gets attention. I don't love the word small either, but, we're class there and we're a, mid-size independent. And, those types of awards bring attention to the work. Let's face it, we all like to watch what work makes other creatives get jealous. But at the end of the day, they also build esteem within the agency. All the people that put their heart and soul into the work that really does break the mold mold and win awards in this industry get recognized. And that I think is really important too, just from a cultural and just having momentum perspective.
I do think the culture part is an interesting one for just the reasons that we've discussed on the podcast, which is not everybody works out of the same office anymore. Having the foosball table and the Coke machine, there was a list one time, I think, that came out of advertising age, like, you're a cliche agency if you have these 8 things. And I think my agency had like 7 out of the 8, right? Which was
you just got a putting green, Sean. Come on down.
We had the telephone booth that you used for calls or whatever, but I don't know. It will be interesting to see how do you tie things together culturally with a generation that's coming into this industry that comes from a completely different culture. Okay, last question, you guys. Once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. It's called Key to My Heart. You can invite anyone alive or no longer with us to keynote a marketing event that you're putting on. Who would it be and why? Brooke, who would you pick and why for your keynote?
So I loved this question so much, and I gave it a lot of thought. And I've decided my keynote is going to be a Gen Z TikTok creator with millions of followers alongside a Fortune 50 CEO. I think it's going to be super awkward, obviously, but hilarious. And I think it would force us all to sort of realize where culture authority actually lives now. For me, it would be a real collision of grassroots creator and corporate leader, and would get to what you just asked, which is where is the next decade of business and brand building going, and force a conversation. So that's where I landed.
And did you have anybody specific in mind, Alex Earl, or who did you have in mind?
You know what? I don't really care. I would love for, I'm biased, but I would love for it to be 2 women, and really, really hear their voices and think about the world through the eyes of the creator who's super in touch culturally and has an important voice, with the head of the C-suite to really jab and sort of vet that out.
One of my guests last week said Cindy Rose and David Bowie. And so again, that was kind of
a great one.
Visualization of just thinking, how would those two perhaps, interact within that environment? We'll see some interesting interactions at Advertising Week. It is one of the things that I do enjoy about that event. They bring in some of these, I don't know if you want to call them celebrities, but they are to some extent. I remember when the group from Shark Tank was there and everybody was kind of trying to lean in to get the picture with Mark Cuban, and had that at Possible a few years back with both Gary Vee and Bon Jovi, and again, all the same kind of stuff. Al, how about from your perspective? You get the last word. Who would you pick for your keynote and why?
I was going to go in a similar vein in regards to where culture is going, to Mr. Beast. And what I find fascinating is, like, I don't follow him. I've seen him. I know he does. The fact that he's now apparently a billionaire or close to a billionaire and the amount of people that follow him, he has more followers than like countries, and like, it is just incredible the network that he's built from a grassroots up. And I also love the fact that he's thinking of what he does as a business and how he's diversified into so many other different opportunities, not just being on YouTube solely. So I think from what I've continued to read about him and learn about, I think he's a fascinating individual that would be quite interesting to try and tie the idea of like business, advertising, brand building, and how we use that into leverage going forward into the future.
Not to prolong this, but I was following Evan Shapiro on LinkedIn, a friend of mine. He often talks about some of that kind of cultural zeitgeist, and the Jimmy Kimmel thing was, going on in a conversation. And his point wasn't whether something was right or wrong. It was just, we're all watching this diminishing return of broadcast TV when there are personalities like a Mr. Beast. His example might have been Joe Rogan, that have already so surpassed those numbers that really we're looking over here when we really should be looking perhaps somewhere else with what's happening out in the world. Well, listen, on behalf of myself, of course, Al Torres, Brooke Smith, we want to thank all of you guys for listening to this fascinating episode of Rise of the Independent. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for listening to Rise of the Independents, hosted by Sean Halter and presented by MiO Marketplace. MiO, the marketer's matchmaker. Find out more about them by visiting miomarketplace.com today.